She could taste blood in her mouth as her knees hit the forest floor, not from injury, but from biting her own lip to keep from screaming his name. Evra Morrin, the revered bonseer who could unite any fated pair across the kingdom, couldn't even feel her own mate's touch without watching him collapse in agony. What kind of cruel joke had the moon goddess played on her? To be born with the gift of sensing soul threads while having her own permanently sealed away. Looking back, she should have known the emptiness she'd carried since birth wasn't natural, it was inflicted. And then came the summons that would shatter her carefully constructed peace. The king without a mate needed her talents. The irony wasn't lost on her as she packed her ceremonial white robes, hands trembling slightly. For years, she'd guided others to their perfect unions while silently suffocating under the weight of her own isolation. Truth be told, she'd stopped believing in the beauty of fated bonds long ago. They were just another reminder of what she could never have. Soon after arriving at the northern court, Evra felt something shift inside her. The palace walls seemed to pulse with an ancient energy that made her wolf stir for the first time in years. Her mentor had warned her never to hope, never to dream that her sealed bond might somehow break. Remember, the old woman had whispered, "Your gift comes at the price of your happiness." Those words had haunted Evra through countless sleepless nights, but never had they felt more suffocating than now. King Darius Valen was nothing like she'd expected. Instead of the desperate, pathetic ruler she'd imagined, he stood tall and proud, his green-gold eyes reflecting a quiet resignation that matched her own. Without warning, a strange sensation crawled across her skin the moment their gazes locked, like frost forming over a still pond. "Bonseer," he acknowledged, his deep voice sending an unexpected tremor down her spine. "I thank you for answering my call." Her body moved on instinct, dropping into the customary bow. "I live to serve the will of fate, Your Majesty." Despite his composed exterior, his wolf's agitation was palpable in the air between them. As if pulled by an invisible string, Evra found herself stepping closer, drawn to his untamed energy like a moth to dangerous flame. The tension broke when he extended his hand, a simple courtesy, nothing more. As the silence stretched between them, she hesitated. No one had warned her about his beauty, savage and refined all at once, like a weapon crafted by master hands. With every heartbeat that passed, the space between them seemed to shrink, charged with something electric and forbidden. Before she could stop herself, Evra's fingers brushed against his. The moment their skin connected, a guttural sound tore from his throat. His body convulsed violently, muscles seizing as he dropped to one knee. His eyes flashed from human to wolf and back again, pain etched into every line of his face. Yet what terrified her more wasn't his reaction, it was her lack of one. No spark. No heat. No recognition. Only emptiness where her bond should be. Between one breath and the next, guards flooded the room, spears pointed at her throat. "Step away from the king," one snarled, his wolf eyes glowing with threat. Under the weight of their stares, Evra's chest ached with humiliation. She'd failed before she'd even begun. What use was a bonseer who couldn't even touch the person she was meant to help? "Leave us," Darius commanded, his voice strained as he struggled to his feet. The guards hesitated, exchanging uncertain glances. "I said leave," he roared, his wolf breaking through for just an instant, making them scramble backward. As the doors slammed shut, Evra felt it, clear as day, the tremor in the air that signaled uncontrolled power. His wolf was close to the surface, dangerously so. Her voice trembled when she finally spoke. "Forgive me, Your Majesty. I didn't know my touch would cause you pain." Something inside her shifted when she saw not anger in his eyes, but curiosity. Her world tilted as he studied her, his gaze moving from her face to her hands and back again. "Did you feel nothing?" he asked, his voice unnervingly soft. The air thickened between them as Evra faced the truth she'd carried her entire life. "I feel nothing," she whispered. "I never have." Time stood still as understanding dawned in his eyes. Not pity, which she'd grown accustomed to, but recognition, as if he'd discovered something both beautiful and devastating. A beat later, he said the last thing she expected. "Stay." Her breath caught in her throat. "I'm sorry." "Stay at court," he repeated, straightening to his full height despite the obvious pain still coursing through him. "Your unique situation intrigues me." What he didn't say hung between them like a physical thing. "You're different. You're like me. You're broken too." In the quiet that followed, Evra should have remembered her training, maintain neutrality, never become emotionally involved. Instead, she heard herself say, "As you wish, Your Majesty." As the echo faded, something ancient stirred in the air around them, like the forest itself had taken a deep breath. Her thoughts spun with possibilities. What did he see in her that made him want her to stay despite the obvious danger her touch presented? What cruel trick of fate had bound them in this impossible situation? The shadows danced between them as Darius turned away, his shoulders tight with barely contained power. "The full moon rises in 3 days," he said, staring out the window toward the distant mountains. "I expect you'll join me for the ceremony." It wasn't a request. Yet despite everything, despite years of training herself not to hope, a small flame ignited in Evra's chest. Not love, she wasn't foolish enough for that, but curiosity. Perhaps even the first fragile tendrils of purpose. Her instincts surged as she realized what staying truly meant. The emptiness she'd carried her entire life suddenly felt less like a prison and more like a mystery waiting to be solved. As if the forest watched through the windows, the wind shifted outside, carrying with it the scent of change. Darius inhaled deeply, his nostrils flaring as if catching some elusive fragrance. "I can't promise I'll find what blocks your bond," she warned, needing him to understand the limitations of her gift. A growl rose in his throat, not threatening, but determined. "I'm not asking you to find anything," he replied, turning to fix her with those unnerving green-gold eyes. "I'm asking you to consider what it might mean that my wolf, who has rejected every potential mate for decades, went completely silent the moment you entered this room." Her bones remembered an ancient teaching then, that sometimes the absence of feeling was more significant than feeling itself. That sometimes silence wasn't emptiness, but protection. As though fate whispered directly in her ear, Evra suddenly understood what had been done to her. The horror of it stole her breath. Her mentor hadn't sealed her bond to protect the world from what she might become. She'd sealed it to hide the truth of who Evra's mate truly was. His touch burned like a brand on her skin, yet somehow left no mark, the cruelest joke of all. 3 days at court, and Evra found herself constantly tracking King Darius's movements, as if her body knew what her sealed bond refused to acknowledge. How could the absence of something hurt so physically? She'd spent her life guiding others to their mates while accepting her own emptiness, but now that emptiness had transformed into an ache so profound it threatened to swallow her whole. What would you do if your soul recognized someone your body couldn't feel? And yet he watched her. Always watched her. From across the council chamber, the king's eyes followed her movements with an intensity that made the hairs on her neck rise. Despite the obvious agony her proximity caused him, he kept her close, inviting her to meetings, requesting her presence during diplomatic negotiations, seeking her counsel on matters that had nothing to do with mate bonds. Without thinking, Evra reached for her ceremonial pendant, fingers tracing the crescent moon etched into silver. The movement caught Darius's attention, his nostrils flaring slightly as if catching her scent even from across the room. Next came the dreams, vivid, scorching visions that left her trembling in the darkness. In them, she could touch him freely, run her fingers through his midnight hair, press her lips against the hollow of his throat. In dreams, there was no pain, no barrier, no emptiness. Just completion. What followed was a morning ritual of shame and confusion. Because with each passing day, the line between duty and desire blurred further. She was a bond seer, meant to remain neutral, untouched, uninvolved. Yet here she stood, silently yearning for what she could never have. The tension broke one afternoon during a private audience in the king's study. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, catching golden highlights in Darius's dark hair as he bent over ancient maps. "Tell me about the bonds you've seen," he said without looking up, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate directly against her skin. Despite that strange request, Evra answered carefully. "Each one manifests differently, Your Majesty. Some are quiet, subtle connections that deepen over time. Others are immediate, overwhelming, like being struck by lightning." As the silence stretched between them, Darius finally lifted his gaze to meet hers. "And which would ours be, do you think? If it existed?" Her chest ached at the directness of his question. "I wouldn't know," she whispered. "I've never felt one." With every step he took toward her, her pulse raced faster. She should step back, maintain proper distance. Instead, she remained rooted to the spot, caught in his gravitational pull. "Yet you see the threads that connect others," he observed, circling her slowly, like a predator assessing its prey. As fire bloomed beneath her skin, Evra struggled to maintain her composure. "I see them because I'm outside them. Neutral, unconnected." The bitter truth of her existence. The air thickened as he drew closer, stopping just beyond touching distance. "What if that's not true?" His voice dropped lower, almost a whisper. "What if you're not meant to be neutral at all?" Her breath caught at his implication. "The sacred texts are clear. Bond seers serve fate. We don't participate in it." The same sacred texts that speak of the Lycan king finding his mate during his first awakening ceremony? Darius countered, a harsh edge to his voice. "I've had 3 such ceremonies." 3 times the moon goddess remained silent. The space between them burned as understanding dawned. "You think the texts are wrong." "I think," he said carefully, "that some truths are deliberately hidden." Her voice trembled as she asked the question she'd been avoiding since their first meeting. "What happened when we touched? What did you feel?" Time stood still as his gaze held hers, something raw and vulnerable flickering behind his carefully controlled expression. "Everything," he whispered. "I felt everything at once, like drowning and burning simultaneously." In the stillness that followed, her wolf stirred, a sensation so foreign and unexpected that Evra gasped aloud. For years, her wolf had been dormant, a silent passenger rather than a partner. Yet now it pressed against the boundaries of her consciousness, desperate to be acknowledged. Before she could move, voices echoed in the corridor outside. The moment shattered as royal guards entered, announcing the arrival of the Eastern Province delegation. With a single glance, Darius withdrew behind his mask of regal indifference, their connection severed as cleanly as if cut by a blade. Moments later, she stood like a ghost at the edge of the throne room, watching as nobles bowed and scraped before their king. Evra's thoughts spun with possibilities and fears. If what Darius suggested was true, if her neutrality was based on lies, what else had her mentor concealed? As the wind shifted in the room with the opening of the grand doors, a new scent entered, sharp, distinctive, masculine. Evra's attention snapped to the tall figure striding confidently toward the throne. Unlike the other nobles with their affected mannerisms and obvious fear, this man moved with natural grace, his blue eyes scanning the room with calm assessment. Her name hung in the air when Darius announced, Lord Kalen Velstrid, welcome to the Northern Court. May I present Evra Morrin, Bonseer of the Sacred Circle." In the quiet that followed, Lord Kalen's gaze settled on her with unmistakable interest. "A Bonseer? How fortuitous," he murmured, approaching her with an extended hand. "I've long wished to consult with one of your order." Her bones remembered the pain that had gripped Darius at her touch. She hesitated, preparing herself for a similar reaction. As though sensing her apprehension, Kalen's smile deepened. "I promise I don't bite, Lady Evra." With her soul answering to a different call entirely, Evra placed her hand in his. Nothing happened. No pain. No convulsions. Just the normal warmth of skin against skin. The wind carried his name through the room as he lifted her hand to his lips. "Enchanted," he said, his breath warm against her knuckles. Her wolf pressed forward suddenly, not in recognition, but in rejection. "Not mate," it seemed to whisper. Wrong. Yet as she turned to seek Darius's reaction, the raw fury in his eyes made her blood run cold. His knuckles had turned white where they gripped the throne's armrests, and the muscle in his jaw worked furiously. As if the forest watched through the high windows, the shadows between them seemed to deepen and stretch. "Lord Kalen will be staying with us through the full moon," Darius announced, his voice deceptively calm though his eyes never left Evra's face. "Perhaps our Bonseer would be willing to guide him during his visit." A growl rose in her throat that she barely managed to suppress. This was punishment, she realized. For what? She wasn't entirely sure. For touching another man without pain? For momentarily diverting her attention? As though fate whispered warnings in her ear, Evra suddenly understood she was caught between powerful forces, Darius's jealousy, Kalen's interest, and her own awakening wolf. Without another word, Darius dismissed the gathering. As nobles filed from the throne room, Kalen lingered by her side, already speaking of arrangements to meet the following day. Her instincts surged, screaming danger, not from Kalen himself, who seemed genuinely courteous, but from the situation unfolding around her. The threads of fate were tangling, knotting in ways she couldn't yet decipher. The moment their eyes locked across the emptying throne room, Evra knew with bone-deep certainty that Darius had just declared war. Not against Kalen, but against the bond that refused to manifest between them. And she let it happen, this dangerous game, because for the first time in her life, she felt something stirring in the emptiness where her bond should be. Not love, not yet, but possibility. She pressed her palm against the ancient text until her fingers left smudges on the yellowed parchment. Somewhere in these scrolls lay the truth about her sealed bond, a truth her mentor had hidden, then taken to her grave. Evra's hands trembled as she revealed a passage she'd never seen before, one that made her blood run cold. To seal a royal bond is the gravest of sins, for it disrupts not only two souls, but the very balance of power within the pack. If what she suspected was true, if Darius was truly her mate, then someone had committed treason against the crown itself. But who would risk such a thing? And more importantly, why? As the silence stretched in the dusty royal archives, Evra felt the weight of her discovery pressing against her chest. 7 days at court, and everything she'd believed about herself was unraveling like a poorly woven tapestry. Without warning, the door creaked open. Evra hastily covered the forbidden text with mundane scrolls as Lord Kalen stepped into the room, his smile as warm as spring sunlight. "Hiding from me, little seer?" he teased, moving with that fluid grace that seemed almost predatory despite his friendly demeanor. Despite that casual greeting, Evra's instincts flared with caution. 5 days of Lord Kalen's constant attention had taught her two things. The Eastern noble was charming beyond measure, and he wanted something from her that went beyond mere courtship. "Research," she murmured, gesturing vaguely at the scattered texts. The king requested information about historical mate bonds. The moment their eyes locked, Kaylin's expression shifted slightly, so subtle she might have missed it if she hadn't been studying faces her entire life. A flicker of calculation beneath the warmth. The king seems unusually concerned with mate bonds for someone who's accepted his solitary fate, Kaylin observed, trailing his fingers along the edge of the table as he approached. One might wonder if his interest has been rekindled. Her heart skipped at the implication. I wouldn't presume to know His Majesty's mind. With his scent in the air, cedar and something sharper beneath, Kaylin leaned closer, his voice dropping to a confidential whisper. Come now, Evra. We both know there's something unusual between you and the king. The entire court whispers about it. The air thickened as her pulse quickened. Gossip is beneath you, my lord. Not gossip, he corrected smoothly, observation. The way he watches you when he thinks no one's looking. The way you tense whenever he enters a room. And most telling, his eyes narrowed slightly, the fact that in 6 days, he hasn't once touched you in public, despite clearly wanting to. Her breath caught at his perceptiveness. The relationship between a bonseer and her sovereign is complicated. Kaylin's laugh held no humor. I'd wager complicated doesn't begin to cover it. Before she could form a response, the library door swung open again, and her name hung in the air as King Darius himself stood in the entrance, his powerful frame filling the doorway. His gaze took in the scene, her flushed face, Kaylin's proximity, and darkened dangerously. In the quiet that followed, her soul answered to the unspoken claim in those green-gold eyes. Lord Kaylin, Darius acknowledged with cold formality. I wasn't aware you had an interest in ancient texts. The tension broke as Kaylin straightened, bowing with perfect respect that somehow still managed to seem insincere. My interests are quite diverse, Your Majesty, though I believe I've found what I was looking for. His gaze slid meaningfully to Evra before he excused himself, leaving an oppressive silence in his wake. As though fate whispered warnings in her ear, Evra suddenly understood why Kaylin had sought her out. Not for courtship, not truly, but as leverage against the king. The shadows danced between them as Darius approached, his movements controlled yet radiating barely contained power. I see Lord Kaylin has been keeping you entertained. Her voice trembled when she finally met his gaze. He's persistent. And you? A muscle in his jaw twitched. Do you welcome his persistence? Her world tilted at the naked vulnerability beneath his question. This powerful man, this king who commanded armies with a gesture, was asking if she preferred another. The absurdity would have made her laugh if not for the genuine hurt lurking in his eyes. He can touch me without pain, she said softly, stating the cruel truth between them. Time stood still as understanding transformed his expression. Not anger as she'd expected, but determination. Is that what you want, Evra? He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body without contact. Someone who can touch you without consequence? Her bones remembered the dreams that had plagued her every night, dreams of his hands on her skin, his mouth on hers, without the barrier of pain between them. What I want is impossible. A growl rose in his throat, not threatening but frustrated. Nothing is impossible. There must be a way to break whatever seal binds you. Something inside her shifted at his words, hope flickering to life like a dangerous flame. Even if there were, she whispered, the risk would be unimaginable. His chest ached visibly at her words. Tell me. The air between them burned as she explained what she'd discovered, how bonds could be sealed but never truly broken. How attempting to shatter such a seal might unleash her wolf in its most primal, untamed form. How she might forget herself entirely, become something feral and dangerous. As if the forest watched through the high windows, the wind shifted. carrying with it the scent of approaching night. You would forget me? The question was barely audible, raw with emotion. Her instincts surged at the pain in his voice. I would forget everything. Everyone. There would be no humanity left, only instinct. His voice trembled with unexpected vulnerability. For how long? No one knows. Her thoughts spun with the terrible gamble. Days. Weeks. Forever. Before he could respond, bells rang throughout the castle. The sunset warning. The full moon would rise in just 3 hours. In the stillness that followed, Darius reached for her, his hand stopping just short of touching her face. The longing in that aborted gesture stole her breath. 3 years, he said, his voice rough. 3 years I've performed the awakening ceremony alone. 3 years the moon goddess has remained silent. His eyes held hers with fierce intensity. Tonight will be no different. I'll stand beneath her light, and she'll withhold what every other wolf takes for granted. Her wolf pressed forward suddenly at his confession, straining against bonds she couldn't see or touch. I'm sorry, she whispered, inadequate words for such profound isolation. His breath caught as he took a step backward. I don't want your pity, Evra. Then what do you want? A beat later, his answer came, simple and devastating. I want what I can't have. His gaze traveled from her eyes to her lips and back again. I want to touch you without pain. As the echo faded, Evra made a decision that would alter everything between them. Meet me in the sacred garden. After the ceremony. Without giving him time to question her, she slipped past him and fled the library, her heart pounding with equal parts terror and anticipation. That night, beneath a sky strewn with countless stars, Darius performed the awakening ceremony alone once more. From the shadows at the edge of the ritual circle, Evra watched not as a bond seer, but as a woman seeing clearly for the first time. When the moon reached its zenith and still the goddess remained silent, a single tear slid down the king's face, quickly wiped away, but not before Evra had seen it. In that moment, she knew. No matter the risk, no matter the cost, she would find a way to break her seal or die trying. Because some bonds were worth the pain of trying to claim them. His fingertips left trails of fire across her skin, burning, searing, yet she didn't pull away. Beneath the ancient moon tree, with silver light filtering through its gnarled branches, Evra made herself endure the king's touch while he fought through waves of agony. Neither spoke as their trembling hands remained connected, both understanding this forbidden contact was a declaration of war against whatever force had separated them. What terrified her most wasn't the pain reflected in Darius's eyes, it was the desperate hope blooming in her chest. If she was wrong about breaking her seal, she wouldn't just lose her sanity, she'd destroy the one man who had ever looked at her emptiness and seen something worth claiming. Even if it burns, he whispered, voice raw with determination, I'd rather feel your hand once than live untouched forever. And then it happened. A single spark, like the first ember of a wildfire, flickered to life between their joined palms. What followed was a gasp torn from both their throats simultaneously. Not from pain, but from something else entirely, a fragment of connection, gone almost before it registered. The moment their eyes locked in stunned recognition, Evra knew her course was set. No going back. The ancient texts had been right, her seal wasn't permanent. It could be broken. Without thinking, she pulled her hand away, cradling it against her chest as if protecting that precious spark from being extinguished. It's possible, she breathed, voice barely audible even in the midnight stillness. The bond, our bond, it's trying to form. The air thickened with tension as Darius stared at his own palm, wonder and disbelief warring across his features. I felt it, he confirmed, his voice rough with emotion. Just for a moment, the pain shifted, became something else. Her world tilted with the realization. For years, she'd accepted her isolation as a mutable fact. Now everything she thought she knew was crumbling, revealing new possibilities beneath. As fire bloomed beneath her skin, Evra made a decision that would alter both their fates forever. "There's a ritual," she explained hurriedly, afraid her courage might desert her. "An ancient ceremony performed at the original Bonseer enclave. It could break my seal completely." In the stillness that followed, Darius's expression hardened from wonder to concern. "The same ritual you said could make you lose yourself? Turn feral." Her chest ached at his immediate understanding of what she was risking. Yes. Despite that single-word confirmation, his reaction wasn't what she expected. No eager acceptance of her sacrifice. Instead, his jaw tightened as he took a deliberate step back. "No." Her breath caught at his refusal. "What?" "I won't let you risk yourself for this," he stated, voice carrying the undeniable authority of his station. "Not your sanity. Not your life." Time stood still as Evra processed his rejection. All her life, she'd been valued only for what she could do for others, her gift, her service, her neutrality. Never had anyone prioritized her safety over their own desires. As the wind shifted through the sacred garden, Darius continued, each word measured and deliberate. "I've lived without a mate for 30 years. I can continue to do so." The space between them burned with unspoken emotions. "And what about me?" she challenged, suddenly angry. "I've lived with this emptiness my entire life, never knowing what was stolen from me. Now that I know, now that I've felt even that tiny spark, you expect me to just accept it? To return to being hollow." Her voice trembled as she pushed forward, unleashing years of suppressed resentment. "My whole existence has been shaped by someone else's decision. Every bond-seer before me felt her own mate bond first, understood it intimately before guiding others. I've been operating blind, going through motions without understanding their true meaning." In the echo of her voice, Darius remained silent, his expression unreadable in the moonlight. Her name hung in the air between them, unspoken but heavy with meaning. "This isn't about you," she whispered finally. "It's about me reclaiming what was taken. My choice, my risk to take." Before he could respond, a rustling from the garden entrance caught their attention. Lord Kalen emerged from the shadows, his blue eyes reflecting moonlight like twin stars. "Forgive the interruption," he said smoothly, though his expression suggested he was anything but sorry. "The council is requesting your majesty's presence." Something about border reports from the western province. Beneath the moonlight, tension stretched between the three of them, an unspoken triangle of power, desire, and suspicion. Her wolf stirred, pressing forward with unusual intensity. "Danger," it seemed to whisper. Not from Darius, but from the man watching them with calculated interest. A growl rose in her throat that she barely managed to suppress. How much had Kalen overheard? And more importantly, what did he intend to do with that information? As though fate whispered urgent warnings, Evra suddenly understood. Kalen hadn't stumbled upon them by accident. He'd been following her, waiting for precisely this kind of revelation. The moment their eyes locked, Kalen's mask slipped just enough for her to glimpse the truth beneath his charming exterior. Not just ambition, but something darker. Something hungry. Without warning, Darius stepped between them, his massive frame blocking Kalen from her view. "Return to the council chambers," he commanded. "I'll join shortly." The tension broke as Kalen bowed with exaggerated deference. "Of course, Your Majesty." His gaze slid to Evra one last time before he turned and disappeared back into the palace. In the quiet that followed, her soul answered to the protective gesture Darius had made, placing himself physically between her and perceived threat. Her thoughts spun with possibilities and fears. If Kaelin had overheard their conversation about the ritual, about her sealed bond with the king. "He knows," she whispered, the realization sending ice through her veins. As the sky darkened with gathering clouds obscuring the moon, Darius turned to her, his expression grave. "Then we have no time to waste. If word of this reaches the wrong ears." "I need to leave," she interrupted, sudden urgency propelling her words. "Tonight, the Bonseer Enclave is 3 days' journey through the northern pass. If I delay, we leave at dawn," he corrected firmly. Her breath caught at the implication. "We?" His eyes held hers with fierce intensity. "You think I would let you face this alone?" Something inside her shifted at his words, at the determination in his voice. This wasn't just about claiming a mate bond anymore. This was about partnership, about facing unknown dangers together. The air thickened as understanding passed between them. If she failed, if the ritual transformed her into something feral and dangerous, Darius would be the one forced to deal with the consequences. "You could be killed," she whispered, the possibility making her voice catch. A sad smile touched his lips. "If the price of your freedom is my blood, so be it." As if the forest watched through the garden walls, the wind carried his name across the space between them. In that moment, with no touch needed, their connection felt more real than anything Evra had experienced in her life. Her instincts surged as she made her decision. "Dawn," she agreed. "But not together. You could not be seen leaving with me. The council would never allow it. Especially not with Kaelin watching." Darius nodded reluctantly, acknowledging the political reality of their situation. "I'll follow separately. Meet me at the northern ridge crossing by midday." Her wolf pressed forward suddenly, almost painfully eager to be freed from its constraints. 3 days to the Enclave. 3 days until she would either claim her true nature or lose herself completely. Without another word, she turned to leave, already mentally preparing for her journey. "Evra," he called softly, stopping her at the garden's edge. She turned, finding him standing tall and regal in the moonlight, every inch the king, yet his eyes held only the man beneath the crown. "Whatever happens," he promised, "whatever you become, I will find you. I will wait for you. For as long as it takes." As the echo faded into the night, Evra felt something crack inside her, not her seal, not yet. But the wall she'd built around her heart to protect herself from wanting what she couldn't have. She left without responding, because what could she possibly say to such a vow? Some promises were beyond words. She could feel her wolf clawing at her insides as she approached the ruins, ancient stones calling to something primal within her blood. The abandoned Bonseer Enclave loomed before Evra like a skeleton picked clean by time, once sacred, now forgotten by all but those who carried its secrets. 2 days of hard travel through mountain passes had brought her here, to the birthplace of her order, where the first Bonseers had learned to read soul threads by the grace of the moon goddess herself. In all her years of training, Evra had never been permitted to visit this hallowed ground. Now she understood why. The crumbling stone archway bore a single warning etched in the old language: "Here lies truth. Enter at the peril of your soul." What terrified her wasn't the ritual she was about to perform, it was the gnawing suspicion that Darius hadn't followed as promised. Without another word, she stepped across the threshold, feeling ancient magic wash over her skin like static electricity. The moment her feet touched the Enclave's inner sanctum, a shiver ran through her entire being. This place remembered her somehow, recognized the blood of the Bonseers flowing through her veins. Under the weight of countless stone gazes, wolf statues arranged in a perfect circle around the central altar, Evra began unpacking the ritual components she'd hastily gathered before fleeing the palace. Silver dust, moonwater, a lock of her own hair, and finally, the ceremonial dagger she'd carried since her initiation, its blade never before used for blood magic. As fire bloomed beneath her skin, Evra realized she wasn't alone. "I wondered when you'd notice me," came a voice from the shadows. Not Darius's deep timbre, but something lighter, touched with amusement. Her breath caught as Lord Kalen stepped into the fading daylight, casually leaning against a broken column as if they were meeting in a palace garden rather than sacred ruins miles from civilization. "How did you find me?" she demanded, fingers tightening around the ritual dagger. A beat later, his smile spread like slow poison. "I've been watching you since the moment you arrived at court, little seer. Did you think I wouldn't notice your hasty departure? Or the king's mysterious absence shortly thereafter?" Something inside her shifted as understanding dawned. Kalen hadn't stumbled upon her conversation with Darius by accident. He'd been following her all along. The tension broke as he approached, each step measured and deliberate. "You're about to do something dangerous," he observed, gaze flicking to the ritual items spread before her. "Something forbidden." Her voice trembled when she finally spoke. "This doesn't concern you." "Oh, but it does." His eyes held hers with unsettling intensity. "Everything concerning the king's potential mate concerns me greatly." The air thickened as Evra processed his words. "How could you possibly know that you're his mate?" Kalen interrupted, circling her slowly. "Or that someone sealed your bond at birth?" "I've suspected both since I first saw you together." The way he reacts to your touch, pain rather than pleasure, it's the classic sign of a tampered bond. As the sky darkened with approaching sunset, her wolf surged forward with unexpected ferocity, bristling at the threat Kalen represented. Her chest ached with sudden clarity. "You're not here to help me." Kalen's laugh held no warmth. "Clever girl." "No, I'm not." The space between them burned with unspoken danger. "Then why follow me all this way?" "To ensure you never complete this ritual," he stated simply, his friendly mask finally dropping completely. "To ensure the king remains mateless." Vulnerable. Her world tilted as the pieces fell into place. "You want the throne. Want it? I've earned it." His voice hardened with long-nursed resentment. "For generations, my family has served as the kingdom's protectors while Darius's line grew soft with luxury. The northern wolves need a strong leader, not a touch-starved king whose wolf is half-mad with isolation." Her bones remembered an ancient teaching then. Power corrupts souls faster than silver burns flesh. Time stood still as she assessed her options. The ritual required complete concentration. She couldn't perform it while defending herself against Kalen. But darkness was falling quickly. If she didn't complete this ceremony under tonight's full moon, she'd have to wait another month, a month during which Kalen could return to court and destroy everything. As though fate whispered guidance in her ear, Evra suddenly noticed movement at the enclave's entrance, a massive shadow slipping silently through the archway. Her heart skipped at the familiar silhouette. Darius had come after all. With her soul answering to his presence, she made a split-second decision to distract Kalen. "Even if you stopped me," she challenged, voice rising deliberately. "What then? Kill me?" "Darius would hunt you to the ends of the earth." "Kill you?" Kalen seemed genuinely offended. "Absolutely not. You're far too valuable, little seer." His eyes gleamed with dark intention. "No, I'd simply ensure your bond remains sealed, and then claim you for myself." A growl rose in her throat, not entirely human. "I would never accept you. You wouldn't have a choice." His fingers reached out to brush her cheek. With the right leverage, even the most reluctant mates can be persuaded. Before he could touch her, a thunderous roar shook the enclave, sending dust and small stones raining from the ceiling. The shadows danced between them as Darius emerged from the darkness, fully shifted into his massive wolf form, teeth bared in murderous rage. In the span of a breath, chaos erupted. Kalen barely had time to begin his own transformation before Darius slammed into him with the force of a battering ram, sending them both crashing through a crumbling wall. Her name hung in the air, unspoken but urgent, as Darius's eyes met hers briefly before he turned back to his opponent. Without thinking, Evra raced to the central altar. This might be her only chance. While the wolves fought, teeth snapping, claws tearing at flesh, she hastily arranged the ritual components, her hands shaking with adrenaline. As the wolves circled each other, snarling and bleeding, Evra began the ancient chant, her voice rising above the sounds of battle. The words felt strange on her tongue, yet somehow familiar, as if her blood remembered what her mind had never known. The moment the first drops of her blood touched the altar stone, power surged through the enclave, wild, ancient magic that made the very air shimmer with energy. Her wolf pressed forward suddenly, straining against bonds she'd never been able to see but had felt her entire life. As her blood mixed with the silver dust and moon water, those invisible chains began to crack, sending shooting pain through every nerve in her body. Without warning, the fighting wolves crashed back into the central chamber. Kalen, bleeding heavily from multiple wounds, still managed to lunge toward the altar, desperate to stop the ritual. In that moment, Evra made her final choice. She plunged the ceremonial dagger directly into the stone, completing the ritual with a blinding flash of silver light. What followed was agony beyond imagination. Her body convulsed violently as the seal that had contained her wolf for 23 years shattered completely. The air thickened with primal power as Evra felt herself being torn apart from within, her human consciousness drowning beneath a tidal wave of feral instinct that had been suppressed for too long. As the forest held its breath, her human screams transformed into a howl that shook the ancient stones. Between one heartbeat and the next, where Evra had stood moments before, a shadow wolf rose, fur black as midnight with silver markings like starlight across her shoulders. Her eyes, once gentle brown, now glowed with feral gold, no recognition, no humanity, only wildness. Without another glance at either male, the shadow wolf threw back her head and howled once more before leaping through the shattered wall and disappearing into the gathering darkness. The truth unraveled in her wake. Evra was gone. What remained was something ancient and untamed, a creature of instinct rather than reason. As Darius shifted back to human form, blood streaming from numerous wounds, his anguished roar echoed across the mountains, the sound of a mate who had found and lost his other half in the same breath. Behind him, Kalen laughed weakly despite his injuries. "You're too late, Your Majesty," he taunted, pushing himself up against a broken pillar. "She's gone. Whatever that creature is, it's not your precious bondseer anymore." Darius turned slowly, his naked form silhouetted by moonlight streaming through the broken ceiling. The look in his eyes made Kalen's mocking smile falter. "She is still mine," Darius growled, voice barely human. "And you will never touch her." With his scent in the air, blood and fury and determination, Darius didn't bother with further words. One moment he stood as a man, the next, his massive silver-gray wolf lunged at Kalen's throat. The Lord barely had time to shift halfway before teeth tore through flesh. In the quiet that followed, her name echoed through the mountains as Darius howled his grief and rage to the uncaring moon. He tracked her through the night, following a scent that was both familiar and alien. The shadow wolf moved with unnatural speed, racing through forests and scaling cliffs that would have challenged even the most experienced tracker. But Darius was no ordinary wolf. He was a king without a throne now. a mate without completion. His only purpose, to find her. As dawn broke over the eastern mountains, he finally caught sight of her, a dark silhouette against the pale morning sky, watching him from a high ridge. Their eyes locked across the distance. Hers wild and unrecognizing. His desperate and determined. Slowly, deliberately, he approached not as a king commanding a subject, not as a male claiming a female, but as one broken soul reaching for its other half. The shadow wolf snarled, hackles rising. Darius stopped, then did something unprecedented in the history of his proud lineage. He lowered himself to the ground, belly against the earth, tail tucked, the position of absolute submission. Her instincts surged at this display from such a powerful male. Confusion warred with feral suspicion in those golden eyes. For 7 heartbeats, neither moved. Then the shadow wolf turned and vanished once more into the wilderness. But she hadn't attacked. She hadn't fled immediately. She had watched. And that was enough for Darius to know that somewhere inside that feral creature, some fragment of Evra remained, buried beneath layers of primal instinct, perhaps, but not entirely gone. As if the forest watched their strange courtship unfold, the wind carried his whispered vow across the mountains. I will find you every day. I will wait for you every night. For as long as it takes. Blood matted his silver fur, turning it rust-colored in patches where wounds refused to heal. 7 days. 7 nights. Darius hadn't eaten, barely slept, tracking the shadow wolf through wilderness so remote even his royal hunting parties had never ventured this far. His body screamed for rest, for food, for the comfort of his palace, yet he pushed forward, following the elusive scent that was both Evra and not Evra, something wilder than the bond-seer he'd known. When his royal guards had eventually tracked him down, begging their king to return, he'd snarled with such ferocity they'd retreated without another word. Let Kaelin scheme for the throne. Let the council appoint a new ruler if they must. Nothing mattered except finding her. How could he explain to anyone that the bond he'd never been able to feel now burned like a live coal in his chest, guiding him toward his feral mate with each painful beat of his heart? And then he found her, not through tracking, but because she was waiting for him. The shadow wolf stood atop a rocky outcropping, moonlight gilding her midnight fur, watching him with golden eyes that showed no recognition, only primal curiosity. She made no move to run as he approached, limping from exhaustion and wounds that should have healed days ago. Without thinking, he shifted to human form despite the vulnerability it created. Blood trickled from reopened gashes as he knelt in the moonlight, palms open in supplication. Evra, he whispered, his voice rough from disuse. I know you're in there. Somewhere. The shadow wolf's head tilted slightly, ears pricked forward at the sound of his voice. No recognition flickered in those wild eyes, yet she didn't flee. As the silence stretched between them, Darius noticed something he'd missed before, a thin silver thread, barely visible in the moonlight, extending from his chest toward hers. The bond, manifesting physically for the first time. With every heartbeat that passed, the thread seemed to strengthen, pulsing with a soft glow that matched the rhythm of his heart. Next came a low growl from the shadow wolf, not threatening, but confused, as if she too could sense the connection, but couldn't understand it. What followed was the first trembling step forward that she took toward him. Darius remained motionless, hardly daring to breathe as the massive black wolf approached, her movements cautious yet deliberate. The moment her nose touched his outstretched hand, a shock ran through both of them, not pain, but recognition. The shadow wolf jerked back, shaking her head as if trying to dislodge an unwelcome thought. Despite that reaction, she didn't run. Instead, she circled him slowly, scenting him from every angle, occasionally pressing her cold nose against his skin as if trying to memorize him. As if fate demanded it, Darius remained still, allowing her examination even when her teeth grazed his shoulder in what could have been either a test or a warning. Between one breath and the next, the shadow wolf did something unexpected. She lay down beside him, not touching, but close enough that he could feel the heat radiating from her body. In the echo of her silent acceptance, Darius felt something crack open inside his chest. Not quite hope, but its fragile precursor. As the bond pulsed between them, Darius whispered stories into the night of a king who had never found his queen, of ceremonies beneath empty moons, of the moment a white-robed bond-seer had walked into his throne room and silenced his restless wolf for the first time in 30 years. Her chest ached visibly at his words, subtle shifts in her posture revealing that some part of her was listening, understanding. A beat later, he dared to move his hand slowly toward her, stopping just short of touching her midnight fur. "May I?" he asked softly. The shadow wolf's golden eyes studied him for a long moment before she inched forward, pressing her head against his palm in silent consent. Time stood still as his fingers sank into thick fur, stroking gently. There was no pain this time, no convulsions, no agony. Only connection. Her voice trembled, not human words, but a soft whine that conveyed confusion and yearning in equal measure. Without thinking, Darius leaned forward and pressed his forehead against hers, closing his eyes as their breaths mingled in the cold night air. "Come back to me," he whispered. "However long it takes. However many forms you wear. I'll wait." In the stillness that followed, her body moved on instinct, pressing closer until she was curled against his side, her massive form providing warmth against the mountain chill. As the sky darkened further with gathering clouds, they remained that way, the Lycan king and his feral mate, connected by a bond neither fully understood but both could finally feel. With every step he took the next morning, the shadow wolf followed. Not beside him as an equal, not yet, but trailing several paces behind, watching his every move with those unnerving golden eyes. When hunters crossed their path and raised weapons at the sight of the massive black wolf, Darius shifted instantly, tearing through their ranks with ruthless efficiency, while the shadow wolf watched from the safety of the tree-lean, head tilted in what almost looked like admiration. Her world tilted as something ancient stirred in her feral mind, the recognition of a worthy mate, strong enough to protect, fierce enough to respect. That night, when Darius made camp beneath an overhanging cliff, the shadow wolf crept closer than before, settling at his feet while he built a small fire against the encroaching cold. Her thoughts spun with fragments of memory that made little sense. White robes, silver pendants, pain and isolation, all overlaid with the strange comfort of this silver-haired man's presence. As if the forest watched their unusual courtship, the wind carried whispers through the trees that seemed to speak directly to her primal consciousness. Remember. Return. Reclaim. Her bones remembered something her mind could not, that this man was important, that he belonged to her somehow. The space between them burned with unspoken potential as the shadow wolf finally closed the distance completely, resting her massive head in Darius's lap while he stroked her fur with reverent fingers. "Evra," he murmured, the name striking sparks of recognition in her feral mind. "My Evra." Her instincts surged at his claim, not with rejection, but with a strange sense of rightness. "My king," her wolf seemed to answer, though no human thought formed to accompany the feeling. As though fate whispered directly in her ear, the shadow wolf felt something shift inside her, a fragmenting of the pure animal instinct that had driven her since the ritual. For just a moment, something more complex, more human, flickered in those golden eyes. Darius saw it instantly, the flash of awareness that came and went like lightning. "You're still in there," he breathed, joy making his voice catch. "You're finding your way back." In the quiet that followed, her soul answered to his recognition with a soft whine that sounded almost like frustration, the sound of a creature trying to remember what it once was. Without another word, Darius shifted to his wolf form, silver gray fur gleaming in the firelight. The shadow wolf startled, then relaxed as their scents mingled in a more familiar way, wolf to wolf, predator to predator. That night, they hunted together beneath the stars, racing through the forest as equals, communicating in the ancient language of their kind. When they brought down a large stag, the shadow wolf deferred to him first, not from submission, but from respect. As the mark tingled between them, Darius felt their bond strengthening with each passing hour, no longer painful, no longer one-sided. Whatever magic had been done to seal Evra away was unraveling, its power no match for the natural force of a true mate bond. Her soul answered to the call of his, even when her mind couldn't comprehend the connection. The wind carried his name through the trees when, 3 nights later, the shadow wolf suddenly stiffened, her entire body going rigid beneath the moonlight. For one terrifying moment, Darius thought she was being pulled away from him again, that whatever progress they'd made was being undone. Instead, she let out a keening cry that pierced the night, not pain, but breakthrough. Recognition dawned in those wild eyes for the first time since her transformation, golden irises flickering briefly to human brown before returning to their feral state. "Darius," she growled, the word barely recognizable but unmistakably human in intent. Her first word. His name. He froze, afraid to hope, afraid to frighten away this fragile emergence of consciousness. "I'm here," he whispered, tears tracking silently down his face. "I'm still here." As the echo faded into the night, the shadow wolf pressed her forehead against his chest, directly over his heart, where their bond pulsed strongest. Not full recognition, not yet, but the first tentative step on the long road back to herself. In that moment, Darius made a silent vow beneath the watching stars. However long it took, however slow the journey, he would be there for every step, every flicker of returning awareness, every painful reclamation of her humanity. Because some bonds, once formed, could never truly be broken, only tested, stretched, and ultimately strengthened by the fire of adversity. Her first human word in 17 days tasted like blood on her tongue. Darius. The shadow wolf had spoken his name beneath a harvest moon, shocking them both into stillness. Now, as dawn broke over the wilderness that had become their sanctuary, Evra felt the battle raging inside her, feral instinct fighting against returning humanity, neither willing to surrender control. Every memory that surfaced brought searing pain, as if her mind was a battlefield where 2 selves fought for dominance. Was this the price of breaking her seal? This fragmented existence, caught between woman and beast? When she'd performed the ritual, she'd accepted the risk of losing herself entirely. What she hadn't anticipated was the agony of remembering in pieces, of feeling her humanity return in painful flashes that left her howling at night, confused and lost between worlds. Without warning, another memory surfaced, the ceremonial white robe she'd worn as a bond seer, the weight of her pendant against her chest, the emptiness where her mate bond should have been. The shadow wolf whimpered, shaking her massive head as if trying to dislodge the intrusive images. The moment their eyes locked across the small clearing where Darius had made camp, she saw understanding dawn in his expression. He'd been watching this process unfold for days now, these episodes of recognition followed by confusion, of humanity followed by retreat into animal instinct. As the silence stretched between them, Evra struggled to form words with a throat designed for howling rather than speech. Hurts, she finally managed, the sound more growl than word. Under the weight of his stare, patient, unwavering, the shadow wolf felt something crack inside her chest. Not a physical pain, but a fissure in the wall between her two selves. I know, Darius whispered, remaining perfectly still where he sat beside the dying embers of their fire. In the 17 days since her transformation, he'd learned not to approach during these moments of breakthrough, not to touch her until she indicated readiness. Your mind is healing itself, finding its way back. Her body moved on instinct, pacing the perimeter of their camp as she processed this latest surge of memory. With every heartbeat, the shadow wolf felt her thoughts becoming more complex, more human, yet the animal remained, refusing to be buried again. Between one breath and the next, Evra made a decision that would alter everything. She stepped toward Darius, her movements deliberate despite the trembling in her limbs. Time stood still as she approached, golden eyes fixed on his face. When she finally stood before him, close enough that their breaths mingled in the crisp morning air, she lowered her massive head until her forehead pressed against his. The air thickened with tension as Darius remained motionless, hardly daring to breathe. This was the most deliberate contact she'd initiated since her transformation. Her voice trembled when she forced out her next words, "Show me, us." In the echo of her fractured request, understanding bloomed across Darius's face. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to retreat, he reached for the leather pouch he carried at his waist. From it, he withdrew a small silver object that caught the morning light, her Bonseer pendant. As the wind shifted, carrying the scent of the familiar metal to her sensitive nose, the shadow wolf went utterly still. Her eyes, fixed on the crescent moon symbol, flickered briefly from gold to human brown. "You carried it," she whispered, her voice stronger now, more recognizably Evra's. A beat later, Darius nodded. "I've carried everything of yours," he admitted. "Your pendant. Your ceremonial dagger. Even this." He withdrew a small white ribbon that had once bound her hair during formal ceremonies. Her chest ached at the tenderness of this gesture. Even when she'd been fully feral, even when she'd nearly torn his throat out during those first chaotic days, he'd preserved these pieces of her former self. Guarded them, honored them. In that moment, something inside the shadow wolf surrendered. Not the wolf itself, that primal power would never again be sealed away, but the fear that had been driving it, the desperate instinct to remain wild rather than vulnerable. Because here, in this scarred and patient man, was proof that vulnerability didn't equal weakness. Her thoughts spun with sudden clarity. The ritual hadn't failed. It had succeeded beyond all expectation. She wasn't meant to return to being just Evra the Bonseer, forever separated from her wolf. She was meant to become this new creature, both human and animal, both civilized and wild. The space between them burned with unspoken understanding as Darius carefully draped the pendant around her neck, the silver chain lengthened to accommodate her wolf form. "Perfect," he murmured, voice rough with emotion. As if the forest watched their reunion, the wind carried his scent to her, not just the surface smell of sweat and leather and wood smoke, but something deeper, something her newly awakened senses could finally interpret correctly. Mate. Home. Mine. Her wolf pressed forward in complete agreement with this assessment for the first time, no longer fighting against her human half, but merging with it. The moment their eyes locked in this new understanding, Evra felt it, the true bond, no longer blocked by ancient seals or feral confusion, surging to life between them like a silver thread pulling taut. "I feel you," she gasped, the words coming easier now. "In my chest, like a second heartbeat." His breath caught at her declaration. "You can feel the bond?" "Yes." The simplest answer, but one that made tears gather in Darius's eyes. With his scent in the air, joy and relief and love, the shadow wolf did something unprecedented. She stepped back, closed her golden eyes, and unleashed the transformation she'd been too afraid to attempt before now. The shift was excruciating after so many days in wolf form, bones breaking and reforming, fur receding into skin, muzzles shortening into human features. When it finished, Evra knelt on the forest floor, naked and trembling. Her human body returned but changed, her hair now streaked with silver that matched the markings her wolf form had carried, her eyes still holding flecks of gold around the pupils. In the stillness that followed, her soul answered to the call of his, fully and completely for the first time. Evra, Darius breathed, her name a prayer on his lips. Without another word, he shrugged out of his leather tunic and draped it gently over her shoulders, his touch reverent as he helped her into the garment that fell to her thighs. Her bones remembered the agony of his touch before the ritual, the convulsions that had overtaken him at the merest brush of skin against skin. Now, as his fingers grazed her shoulder, there was only warmth, the natural heat of connection rather than the burning of rejection. As the sky darkened with gathering storm clouds, Evra raised trembling fingers to touch his face, tracing the new lines that exhaustion and worry had etched around his eyes during their wilderness ordeal. "You waited," she whispered, voice hoarse from disuse. All this time, through everything, the tension broke as Darius caught her hand and pressed his lips to her palm. "I would have waited forever." Her world tilted as he gathered her carefully into his arms, cradling her against his chest as if she were made of glass rather than the predator who had nearly killed him a dozen times in her feral state. "What happens now?" she asked, finding human speech easier with each passing moment. Darius's expression grew serious. "Now we return to face whatever Kaelin has done in our absence. The kingdom will have questions. The council will demand explanations." Her instincts surged at the mention of Kaelin's name, both woman and wolf remembering his threat with equal clarity. "You let him live." "I wounded him badly," Darius confirmed, "but if I killed him outright, his supporters would have called for blood vengeance. We needed time for you to find your way back, time for me to secure my claim." His gaze held hers with fierce intensity. "But make no mistake, he will answer for his actions." In the quiet that followed, Evra felt something she hadn't expected, anticipation rather than dread. Her old self would have feared returning to court, feared the judgment and the politics. This new self, this merged being of woman and wolf, felt only determination. "Then we return," she said simply, "and we face them together." His voice trembled with unexpected vulnerability when he asked, "And after? When the throne is secure and Kaelin is dealt with. What then, Evra?" Without thinking, she leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his, mimicking the gesture of trust her wolf form had given him so many times before. "Then we begin," she whispered. "Whatever comes next, we face it as what we are." "And what are we?" he asked, though the bond pulsing between them already carried the answer. Her heart skipped as she spoke the truth they both felt thrumming between them: mates. Equals. Partners in all things. As fire bloomed beneath her skin, no longer pain but pleasant warmth, Evra realized that in losing herself, she had actually found herself. Not just the bond-seer she'd been trained to be, not just the feral wolf she'd become, but something entirely new. Something whole. Without another word, she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his, their first true kiss, sealing a promise that needed no ceremony or witnesses to make it binding. The shadows danced between them as Darius returned her kiss with exquisite gentleness, as if afraid she might shatter or disappear. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing heavily, Evra smiled, a human expression on lips that had spent weeks curled in wolfish snarls. "I'm not going anywhere," she promised. "Not again." "Nor am I," Darius vowed in return. As the first raindrops began to fall, they took shelter in the small cave that had been their home these past weeks. Tomorrow would bring challenges enough: the return to civilization, the confrontation with Kaelin, the explanations to the council. But tonight belonged to them alone, to learning each other anew, to exploring the bond that now flowed freely between them, to healing wounds both physical and spiritual. For in finding her true nature, Evra had also found her true mate. And in waiting for her return, Darius had found not just a queen for his kingdom, but an equal for his soul. They crowned her with starlight and shadow on the night she should have died. 27 council members had demanded Evra's execution when she and Darius returned to court. The half-shifted creature that was neither fully bonseer nor entirely wolf deemed too dangerous to live. Kaelin's whispered poison had spread through the palace during their absence, tales of feral madness and treasonous ritual magic turning even loyal nobles against their king. When armed guards had surrounded them in the throne room, silver-tipped spears leveled at Evra's heart, she'd felt only a strange calm. After facing the wilderness within herself, court politics seemed almost laughably simple. What stunned the assembly into silence wasn't her fearlessness in the face of execution, but the moment Darius stepped between her and the nearest blade, his voice carrying with royal authority as he uttered 7 words that changed everything. "If she dies, I die with her." And then something extraordinary happened, something that would be whispered about in royal legends for generations to come. The moment their eyes locked across the tense throne room, the mate bond between them flared visibly, a silver thread of light connecting their hearts, pulsing with ancient magic that made even the most skeptical counselors step back in awe. "The moon goddess has spoken," Darius declared, his fingers intertwining with Evra's without a trace of the pain that had once accompanied their touch. "This woman is my mate, my queen, my equal in all things. Reject her, and you reject me. Accept her, and the Northern Kingdom enters a new era of strength." Next came chaos, voices rising in argument, demands for proof, accusations of trickery. Through it all, Evra stood tall, her newly merged self neither cowering nor attacking. Just waiting, watching, the shadow wolf patient within the woman. What followed was the appearance of an unexpected ally. Maya Gregg, Kaelin's own sister, stepped forward from the crowd, her face bearing the marks of recent violence. "My brother attempted to kill me when I discovered his treachery," she announced, pulling back her collar to reveal claw marks across her throat. "He confessed his plan to murder our king and claim the throne during the last full moon. I have witnesses." The tension broke as Kaelin lunged from among his supporters, partially shifting as he charged toward Maya with murderous intent. Before anyone else could move, Evra stepped into his path, her transformation fluid and controlled, not the full shadow wolf, but something between, retaining human stance while gaining wolven strength and speed. In the span of a breath, she had Kaelin pinned to the marble floor, her claws at his throat, her golden-flecked eyes cold with judgment, but not bloodlust. "You sealed my bond," she stated, not a question, but a certainty that had formed during her days in the wilderness as memories returned. "It was you who performed the ritual on me as an infant, wasn't it? Not my mentor." At the revelation a beat later, Kaelin's fear-twisted expression shifted to one of grudging respect. "Clever girl. Your mentor was already dead when you were brought to the Bonseers." He laughed, the sound tinged with madness. "I saw the threads of fate even then, saw that you would be his mate, that together you would be too powerful to control. I had to act." Her breath caught at the confirmation of what her returned memories had suggested. "You infiltrated the Bonseers." manipulated my training, all to keep me from him. The space between them burned with decades of stolen connection as Kaelin's smile widened. And I would do it again. The throne belongs to the Velstrad line, not to touch starved kings who can't even claim their own mates without help. Her voice trembled with the effort of restraining her wolf's desire for vengeance. You stole my life. Kaelin's eyes held no remorse. I molded your life, little seer. Everything you are exists because of my interference. Without me, you'd have been just another royal consort, prettily draped across his arm. I made you something greater, something dangerous. His gaze flicked to the silver markings in her hair, the gold flecks in her eyes. Look at what you've become because of me. The air thickened as understanding dawned in Evra's expression. Not forgiveness, never that, but recognition of an unexpected truth. You're right, she acknowledged, easing back slightly though keeping him pinned. I am what I am because of your interference. Both Bonseer and Wolf. Both civilized and wild. Her lips curved in a predator's smile. Thank you for the gift of my dual nature, Lord Kaelin. I'll use it well as queen. His chest ached with sudden fear as the implications of her words registered. You can't. I can, she interrupted, voice laced with authority that made even the council members straighten in unconscious respect. And I will. Time stood still as Evra turned to address the assembled nobles, maintaining her grip on Kaelin while speaking. Lord Kaelin Velstrad confesses to treason against the crown, illegal blood magic performed on a royal mate, and attempted murder of his own kin. As Bonseer of the Sacred Circle and mate to the king, I claim the right of judgment. In the quiet that followed, her name hung in the air, whispered with newfound reverence rather than fear. Under the weight of countless stares, Darius stepped forward. The right is yours, my queen, he confirmed, the formal acknowledgement sending ripples of surprise through the assembly. No Lycan king had ever granted judgment rights to his mate before. Such power had always been jealously guarded by the throne. Her soul answered to his trust with a surge of pride and determination. This was partnership in its truest form. As the wind shifted through the high windows of the throne room, Evra pronounced her sentence. Banishment. Beyond the eastern mountains, beyond the reach of civilized packs. Her eyes bore into Kaelin's with merciless clarity. You so admired my feral state. Let's see how well you survive it yourself. With his scent in the air, fear mixed with disbelief, Kaelin struggled against her hold. You can't do this. The council won't allow. The council will support their king and queen, Maya interrupted, stepping forward with unexpected authority. As acting head of the Velstrad family in your absence, brother, I pledge our houses to the throne. She turned to address the nobles directly. Who stands with me? Moments later, one by one, the council members knelt, some eagerly, others reluctantly, but all recognizing the shift in power. The truth unraveled before them all. Evra and Darius weren't just mated pairs. They were the beginning of something new. A reign founded on partnership rather than dominance, on strength merged rather than strength imposed. As though fate whispered promises of a changed future, the ancient prophecy scrolls stored in the royal archives trembled on their shelves, words rearranging themselves to reflect the altered course of destiny. In the stillness that followed Kaelin's removal from the throne room, Darius reached for Evra's hand, drawing her to stand beside him at the dais steps. The moon goddess remained silent for 3 awakening ceremonies. He addressed the kneeling nobles, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. Not because she had abandoned our line, but because she was waiting. Waiting for the true bond to be recognized and claimed despite all obstacles. Her bones remembered the painful journey that had brought them to this moment, the sealing of her bond at birth, the agony of their first touch, the feral transformation that had nearly cost her humanity, and finally, the merging of her dual natures into something stronger than either could have been alone. Without another word, Darius led her up the steps to where twin thrones stood, one larger, one smaller as tradition dictated. With a gesture that sent murmurs through the assembly, he indicated she should take the larger throne. From this day forward, he declared, we rule as equals. Two aspects of one whole, just as each of us contains both human and wolf. As the echo faded in the stunned silence, Evra took her place on the throne that had never before been occupied by a queen. The ancient would seem to warm beneath her touch, accepting her claim. Her thoughts spun with visions of the future they would build together, a kingdom where bondseers were no longer neutral observers, but active participants in fate's unfolding, where wolves were neither entirely tamed nor completely wild, but balanced between both worlds. As if the forest watched through the palace windows, the wind carried whispers of change throughout the lands, stories of the Shadow Queen and her Silver King, bound by a love that had overcome seals and transformations, politics and treachery. Between them, something cracked open in the fabric of reality itself, the old barriers between human and wolf, between fate and choice, beginning to dissolve. Her instincts surged with certainty that this was only the beginning. The changes they embodied would spread beyond their kingdom, challenging ancient traditions, rewriting what it meant to be Lycan in all the territories. The moment their eyes locked across the small space between their thrones, Evra felt the bond between them pulse with shared purpose and unshakable devotion. "Are you ready?" Darius asked softly, for her ears alone. With a single glance toward the nervous nobles still kneeling before them, Evra smiled, the expression somehow both regal and feral at once. "I've been ready since the moment I broke my seal," she replied. Every pain was worth this outcome. As if fate whispered blessings upon their reign, moonlight suddenly streamed through the high windows, illuminating their joined hands with silver light. In that moment, with the shadow wolf purring contentedly inside her chest and her mate's hand warm in hers, Evra finally understood the true power of their bond. It wasn't just about completing each other. It was about transforming the world around them. Together.